Hello everyone, welcome from Los Angeles here in sunny Southern California. This is the Petersen Automotive Museum. I'm Jason. I'm going to be walking you through today to show you some of what we have, to go over kind of a little bit of the history of the car, but focus a lot on the science and innovation behind cars. At the birth of the automobile, the car's performance was barely in line with the horse-drawn carriages it would replace. This, the 1886 Benz patent motor wagon, is widely considered the first practical automobile. While modern supercars have over 1,000 horsepower and can go in excess of 250 miles per hour, this car gets 3/4 of a horsepower and tops out around 10 miles per hour. The car gets all of this power from a single-cylinder engine. As you can see, the car looks much different from modern cars as well. The three-wheel design would soon be replaced by the dominance of four-wheeled ones that provided greater stability, particularly when turning. The tall, thin wheels would be useful for driving on the dirty and muddy paths in the pre-road era, but would be upgraded to shorter, wider versions as cars gained speed and needed better traction and handling. Steering was provided by a tiller that would later give way to steering wheels, which provided greater rotational range. Though not a high performer itself, the Benz does begin the story of people using technological means to achieve greater speed and power in getting around. While modern debates about the highest automotive performance may focus on names such as Ferrari, Porsche, McLaren, or Lamborghini, none of those companies existed at the beginning of the 20th century. In 1913, one of the fastest cars on the road was the 35J Raceabout produced by a company called Mercer. Built by Ferdinand Roebling, his nephew Washington Roebling, and the three Cruiser brothers, the car featured a four-cylinder engine that produced 55 horsepower, enough to sustain the car at 70 miles per hour with bursts approaching 90 miles per hour, making it the fastest car on the road. Top speeds were achieved by stripping off all excess materials, such as the body and lights, leaving it a little more than a chassis and engine on wheels with a seat. Given the lack of street lights, the car featured multiple lighting options, and its monocle windscreen is one of the early examples of placing something in front of the driver to shield them from oncoming dirt and debris, which became more noticeable at the speeds the car was able to produce. One of the most famous names in automotive history is Mercedes. For this 1923 Mercedes Targa Floria, the Mercedes name is a model name, as the company Mercedes-Benz would not exist until 1926, when Daimler Motor Works, the maker of the Mercedes, would merge with Benz and name their company after their most popular model. The Targa Floria exemplifies the mix of performance and style that show the balance of design requirements that go into making a car. After World War I, Daimler sought to reinvigorate the company with a focus on racing. After a successful run at the 1921 Targa Floria, an Italian race that was one of the most famous of its day, several Targa Floria cars were produced to market and promote the Mercedes name in America. The car featured the high-performance six-cylinder engine from the successful Mercedes race cars, packaged in beautiful and stylish custom coachwork, and helped set the stage for other more refined designs in the 1920s. Perhaps no make of car best defined performance in the early decades of the automobile than Duesenberg. In early car designs, one of the greatest sources of performance was the size of the engine. This meant that long, tall hoods became a ready identifier of high-performance cars, and thus the prestige and status of the driver. Add in custom coachwork such as that done in Pasadena by Hooper, as seen in this car, and one can see why Duesenberg became a leading example of luxury vehicle in the 1920s and 1930s, so much so that Duesenberg was chosen as Leonardo DiCaprio's car in The Great Gatsby, replacing the Rolls-Royce in the book. The 8-cylinder engine produced almost 400 horsepower, nearly twice as much as any other car on the road. This stylish performance, though, came at a cost. While Ford or Chevy could be purchased for less than $1,000, the Duesenberg cost almost $10,000, and that was just for the chassis and engine. The body would be thousands more. This is a 1959 Ferrari 250 GT long-wheelbase Berlinetta. It is much smaller than the Duesenberg and would not be able to fit the Duesenberg's engine. In fact, the engine inside the Ferrari combusts less than half the fuel of the Duesenberg's in each stroke. However, the Ferrari is faster, reaching a top speed of 167 miles per hour. Some of this higher performance can be explained by the size difference. Smaller cars are lighter, and since mass affects the force required to reach a particular acceleration, it is easier to get the Ferrari up to speed. Lighter materials further contribute to this. However, the engine is still relevant. While the amount of fuel combusted in each stroke is relevant, so is how often the fuel is burned. Ferraris like this rely on extremely fast action, performing around 7,000 revolutions per minute compared to 4,200 for the Duesenberg. This is a 1967 Ford GT40 Mark III. The GT40 was the famed racing car that starred in the 2019 movie Ford vs. Ferrari and helped Ford break Ferrari's stranglehold on racing in the 1960s. The car also shows how new technologies influence automotive design. While in the Targa Florio days, performance came from larger engines, thus the huge hood of that car, by the 1960s more power was being produced from smaller engines that could both rev faster and better manage the flow of the fuel and air that powered them. The car's overall look is increasingly being influenced by aerodynamics, the science of airflows that had taken huge leaps during World War II and after. While each car was built for performance, the design choices made led to a radically different look. A completely different look for high-performance cars takes hold by the 1950s and 1960s, as seen in this 1967 Porsche 910. As mentioned, early cars gained speed and performance by having ever larger engines, resulting in large, blocky cars able to hold the enormous powerhouses being developed. Over time, however, the added weight of the cars, large enough to hold more powerful engines, coupled with the aerodynamic limitations of earlier designs, led to a rethinking of car design. Advanced materials and production techniques further assisted a move to smaller, more aerodynamic vehicles. The 910 also features another performance feature that emerged at the time, a mid-engine design. The engine is placed behind the driver and in front of the rear axle. While lessening the space available for passengers and cargo, it provides better weight distribution that would improve the handling of the car, particularly at faster speeds. The 910 was designed for racing, at which it had great success by having a class victory at Le Mans and famously placing first, second, third, and fourth at the Nürburgring 1,000-kilometer race. However, its look captures the curvy, streamlined style seen in mid-century performance vehicles. The curvy design seen in cars such as the Porsche 910 would, in the 1970s, be largely replaced by a more simplified wedge-like design, as seen in this, a 1971 De Tomaso Pantera. The Pantera was created by race car driver Alejandro De Tomaso, who had to flee his native Argentina after being accused of plotting to overthrow the president. He wound up working with Maserati before beginning to design his own cars. De Tomaso partnered with Ford, who provided the powerful 5.8-liter V8 engine that got this car to 159 miles per hour. Most notably, the body of this car, designed by famed Italian coach builder Ghia, abandons the curves of the preceding era for a low-profile wedge-shaped design. While ostensibly providing better aerodynamics, the wedge shape also provided a futuristic look in the 1970s marketplace. However, in the Pantera's case, this futuristic styling could not mask reliability problems. The frequent breakdowns frustrated the owner of this particular Pantera, Elvis Presley, who after failing to get it to start one night, pulled out his handgun and shot the car. Several bullet marks remain on the steering wheel and floorboard. The wedge design seen in cars like the Pantera will influence the design of one of the most famous cars in history and the quintessential design of the 1980s, the Lamborghini Countach. After defining the notion of a supercar with the Miura in the 1960s, Ferruccio Lamborghini wanted a follow-up design that would further push the boundaries of automotive performance. After several less than successful models, Lamborghini launched Project 112 that would culminate in the Countach. The car featured a larger 5-liter engine, larger than its predecessors, that produced 420 horsepower and a top speed of 186 miles per hour, and that engine was positioned longitudinally, meaning along the length of the car rather than transversely, where the engine was perpendicular to the direction of motion. This provided greater separation between driver and engine, with the driver cabin being moved towards the front of the car. Most notably, the car featured scissor doors that would open up from their front hinges, something never before seen on a production vehicle. Many factors go into a car's design. Sometimes designs are meant to be recognizable, other times they challenge people's expectations. Take, for example, Cadillac. They are one of the world's leading manufacturers of luxury cars, an iconic status built over more than a century. When one sees the Cadillac logo, a particular look is expected. But when Cadillac was celebrating their 100th anniversary in 2003, they released a design that would challenge those expectations. This, the Cadillac CN, was a look into the future of car design. The traditional lines of a Cadillac were traded for this futuristic look. Underneath the body stood advanced mechanical systems that were in some cases borrowed from the F-22 fighter jet. The frame makes use of advanced materials such as aerogel, and the engine uses special technologies that let it adapt to changing requirements, including an engine that is changeable from 12 to 6 cylinders based on the balance of performance and efficiency desired. The evolution of performance reached a pinnacle with this, the Bugatti Veyron, what some people consider the beginning of the hypercar era. The Bugatti name goes back to the early 20th century, when Ettore Bugatti founded an automaker that would become a leader in high-performance, beautiful automobiles. While the original company dissolves by the 1950s, the Bugatti name remains synonymous with a perfect balance of speed and style. In 1998, Volkswagen acquired the rights to the name and began producing high-end sports cars utilizing the mark. Entering production in 2005, the Veyron featured a 16-cylinder engine that produced around 1,000 horsepower and drove the car to a top speed of 253 miles per hour. Instead of relying on natural airflow into the engine, the Veyron featured 4 turbochargers that would force the fuel-air mixture into the engine, increasing the power by providing more combustible material in each stroke. By this time, greater knowledge of aerodynamics led to design decisions being made to best utilize airflow to allow greater speeds, improve handling, and cool the engine and brakes. This can be seen in the rear wing that will adjust positions based on the car's speed. The Veyron has gone down as one of the high points in performance car history. All the cars we look at so far have one thing in common. They run on gasoline. But the next phase of car is most likely to be electric. Despite their apparent newness, electric vehicles have been around longer than their gasoline-powered cousins. The first examples of electric vehicles go back to the 1830s, and a variety of versions would be developed in the succeeding decades. Early electric cars tended to be heavy with limited range, but at the start of the 20th century, more electric cars were in existence than internal combustion vehicles. However, as oil discoveries and production caused fuel to become inexpensive, and technologies such as the electric starter made gas-powered cars easier to use, internal combustion engines became the dominant means of powering cars. But the electric car concept would never disappear completely. A perfect example of an early electric vehicle is this, the 1915 Detroit Electric, manufactured by the Anderson Electric Car Company. The car's electric motors generated around 10 horsepower and drove this car to a top speed of approximately 20 miles per hour. Batteries stored in the front and rear compartments would provide enough energy for a range of around 80 miles. While the current focus on electric vehicles is largely driven by environmental concerns, notably the climate-related impact of the carbon dioxide released by internal combustion vehicles, such concerns were not prevalent in the early 20th century. Electric vehicles then, instead, were marketed primarily to women, as their simplicity to use and relatively clean operation appealed to female drivers who sought an elegant way to get around town. This focus on women can be seen in this car's design, where the cabin features a rearward-facing seat, creating a tea room type atmosphere, and additions such as flower vases. The high roof was designed to accommodate the hats women of the day tended to wear. Whereas early electric car initiatives lost out to the rise of gasoline-powered cars, automotive history has seen repeated attempts to re-energize the market for electric. Fuel shortages after World War II led to some development, a process that took on additional focus in the 1960s with the rise of environmental concerns about the pollution caused by the car, at this time smog rather than greenhouse gases. Cars such as this, the 1960 electric shopper, which was manufactured in California, were created to provide convenient urban transport. Its small size helped negotiate traffic and parking difficulties, though its motor only provided a single horsepower and a top speed of 18. Its small size meant that it could only carry a battery, providing 35 miles of range. A slightly more robust example from the time is this, the 1963 Hemi Kilowatt. Instead of being a completely original car design, the Kilowatt was an electric adaptation of the gasoline-powered Renault Dauphine sedan. As with many electric cars at the time, the Kilowatt was marketed as a secondary car that people would own in addition to an internal combustion vehicle. The car featured a single switch to go between forward and reverse, making it extremely easy to operate. It also could be charged by plugging directly into a home electric outlet. While the mid-century push for electrification did not revolutionize the industry, renewed interest in electric cars began in the 1990s. By this time, pollution and climate concerns, coupled with the desire to lessen dependence on oil imported from parts of the world that were becoming increasingly dangerous, caused several companies to begin developing electric car designs. This, the 1994 U.S. electric car, was developed as a way to demonstrate the potential of electric vehicles and to attract a wealthy clientele. It was marketed at a price of $75,000 in the 1994 Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog and was touted as the only series-produced composite-bodied electric car on the market. The car here was the only one sold through the retailer. Attempts at electrification in the 1990s weren't limited to small independent producers. General Motors got into the act with this, the 1996 EV1, which was the first modern, mass-produced electric vehicle built by a major manufacturer. The EV1 story begins with the Impact, a 1990 concept car that GM released to demonstrate what an electric car could look like and assess the market. The Impact did two things. Huge public interest in the vehicle showed GM the potential market for an electric car, and its mere existence showed California regulators the viability of electric vehicles, causing them to pass new requirements that a certain percentage of cars sold in the state would be electric. These factors persuaded GM to begin electric car production, culminating in the EV1. The car was aerodynamic, lightweight, and easy to operate, and also featured a motor providing 137 horsepower and a range of 100 miles, making it a more viable replacement option for gasoline-powered cars than previous electric models. However, production was costly, and it required entirely new parts networks, meaning GM stopped production after 4 years. None of the cars were sold, instead all being leased, which meant that when GM ended production, it confiscated all the existing units. All but 40 were destroyed by the company. While the EV1 was competitive with other cars on the road, some producers continued to focus on particular market niches. This, the 1996 Corbin Sparrow, was designed to provide efficient transport for a single person, thus it only having one seat. The small size allowed it to be licensed as a motorcycle and to easily navigate urban landscapes. The most famous producer of electric vehicles today is, of course, Tesla. Named for Nikola Tesla, the inventor of alternating current electric power, Tesla has helped popularize electric cars in the modern marketplace by providing versions that can rival gasoline-powered cars in terms of performance and style. This, the 2008 Tesla Roadster, is where the company's efforts started. The Roadster was powered by lithium-ion batteries, which are smaller and provide more energy than the lead-acid and other batteries used for electric cars previously. All early innovation was focused on the electric capabilities of the car, thus the use of a chassis from a Lotus Elise to carry these components. The high performance, long range, and low operating costs of the Roadster helped prove that electric cars could be a serious challenger to internal combustion vehicles. Upon proving the viability of their electric designs with the sporty Roadster, Tesla went on to create cars that were built for everyday use, increasing the chance of widespread adoption. This is one of the earliest prototypes of the Tesla Model S, which was designed and produced wholly in-house and sought to make electric cars fashionable and capable, thus able to compete with gasoline-powered vehicles. Key to electric car design is finding ways to maximize range, the distance the car can travel before needing to be recharged. The 2020 Karma Revero GT achieves this by mixing energy sources. To start, the Revero is a hybrid, pairing its electric motor to a 3-cylinder gasoline-powered generator that charges the car's batteries. Furthermore, and unique for a production car, the Revero has 200-watt solar panels on its roof, providing further energy. These additions boost the range of its 536 horsepower motor from 80 miles to 360 miles. The 2020 Electromechanica Solo continues the tradition of small, urban-focused cars that have been seen throughout the electric car's history. Inspired by the Corbin Sparrow, the car features a single seat, but has upgraded instruments and a more powerful lithium-ion battery that replaces the lead-acid one in the Sparrow. While the Solo continues the tradition of electric cars utilizing a small size to lower their weight and increase their range, the 2020 Bollinger B1 shows the electric revolution is not limited to single-person vehicles. The 14,000-pound vehicle, powered by electric motors at each axle, can perform heavy-duty off-road hauling. To maximize the truck's utilitarian capabilities, both front and rear tailgates can be opened to accommodate long cargo, and the interior can be cleaned with a hose. The importance of performance to automotive design can be seen in how Hollywood utilizes vehicles. Fighting crime on the streets of Gotham requires a powerful car, thus the Batmobile comes equipped with a jet engine sourced from a British Harrier jet, though in the real world the engine is non-functional. And to get the necessary power to travel through time, the DeLorean from Back to the Future is hypothetically powered by a fusion reactor. Though that is all a product of movie magic and the reactor itself is non-functional, the DeLorean itself is a perfect example of the wedge-shaped sports car. Thank you for joining us today, and always feel free to come by the Petersen, where we have hundreds of cars for you to learn a little about the history of the automobile as well as the science of the car.